In this question, we have been asked to identify the appliance that is given in this image here. Now, when we see this appliance, what we can identify is that firstly, there is a large acrylic button that is placed on the palatal area, which is connected to the band which is present on the premolars. Okay, so this is very characteristic of an appliance that is going to require large amount of anchorage. Secondly, if you see the direction of force that is going to be applied, it is here you see these coil springs that are present, and these screws which when open are going to bring about force in this direction. So what we can identify is that this is an appliance that is going to bring about molar distalization. Okay, so from the options that are given here, this appliance is actually a Fastback appliance. It is a relatively new appliance that has been developed by Leone. Okay, so it's a company which has developed this appliance with the cooperation of Lanteri and Francolini. So they could maybe ask you this also, who has given this appliance. So this is a relatively new appliance, and what is very interesting about this appliance is it utilizes both the NEET coil springs as well as these expansion screws. So usually when we use these screws, we are using it to bring about transverse expansion, right? But the orientation of these screws has been turned 90 degrees, and now opening up of these screws is going to bring about force in this direction, right? But what is very interesting is these screws are not used for bringing about distalization directly. What they do is they actually are useful in activating the coil spring. Now, since this is a fixed appliance which cannot be removed, okay, so we don't need patient cooperation, but we need to keep activating these coil springs so that distalization effect can be applied, or the distalizing force can be applied on the molars. So this activation of the coil spring is actually brought about by opening up of these screws. Okay, so this is a very interesting and very new kind of an appliance. These coil springs are made of nickel titanium or NITI. So they are capable of giving constant and low forces onto the molar, which is helpful in bringing about bodily movement. Okay, because we require low continuous forces to bring about tooth movement. It exerts about 200 to 300 grams of force onto the molar. Okay, so this is some of the important points regarding the Fastback distalizer. Now, although since this is a new appliance, you may not be able to identify it immediately. But one way of identifying it is by eliminating the other options that are given. That is the Hilgers PhD, the Jones jig, and the aqua appliance. So let us have a look at these different appliances. Now this appliance is something that is known as the settle-in plate. Okay, this was one of the earliest type of molar distalization appliances which was removable. Okay, so you can see this consists of an acrylic plate which consists of these finger springs which are going to bring about these distalizing force on the molars. And this alone is not going to help in the bodily movement of these teeth, right? So it also incorporates a headgear. Okay, so the headgear is going to bring about the root movement, and the finger spring is going to bring about the crown movement. Okay, so the finger spring will push the crown distally, and then the headgear, which is going to go and attach onto the molar, is going to provide extraoral force to bring about the root uprighting. This is how bodily movement of the molar is going to take place in the distal direction. Okay, now this is a modification of the settle-in plate that is known as the aqua appliance. Now the aqua appliance actually stands for the acrylic cervical occipital anchorage. Okay, so here this is a modification of the settle-in plate because it has removable components as well as the band that is present on the molar, which consists of these headgear tubes, okay, or these tubes into which the headgear component can go and fit. So it uses the cervical occipital headgear, and it brings about distalization of the molar similar to the way we have seen in the settle-in plate, where the tooth movement has been broken down into a crown component and a root component. Okay, so this is how the aqua appliance looks like. Then we come to something known as the pendulum appliance. Right, so the pendulum appliance, which is the classic molar distalization appliance, was given by Hilgers. So it is also known as the Hilgers appliance. Now, what is characteristic of the pendulum appliance other than the Nance acrylic button which is present for anchorage over the palatal area are these springs. Okay, so these springs are characteristic of the pendulum appliance or the Hilgers appliance because they are made of TMA wire, and when they are fabricated they lie on the midline like this. Okay, they lie along the midline, and then they are activated by, so the springs are going to be activated by pulling them in this direction and then engaging them into the lingual sheath. When they're activated, they're going to bring about a force in this direction, which is going to bring about molar distalization. So the arc of the movement of the spring resembles the arc which is going to be taken by a swinging of a pendulum. So there's a swinging motion, first in this direction, then in this direction. That's why it's also known as the pendulum appliance. So these TMA springs are very characteristic of the pendulum appliance, which is what is seen in the Hilgers PhD appliance. So the Hilgers PhD is nothing but a modification of the pendulum appliance, right? So here you can see the same TMA springs that are present, but instead of being embedded in the acrylic, here they go and they attach on the lingual sheath which is present on the expansion screw. So whenever there is a pendulum appliance which consists of an expansion screw, that is known as the Pendex appliance. Okay, but the Pendex appliance also consists of the acrylic plate. In Hilgers PhD, the acrylic component is completely missing. Okay, so it is directly engaged into the lingual sheets which are soldered on the expansion screw, which is going to go and attach onto the premolar, on the occlusal surfaces of the premolars. So this is going to bring about expansion as well as distalization. And lastly, we come to another type of distalization appliance known as the Jones jig. So the Jones jig has both buccal as well as palatal components. So the other appliances we saw were completely on the palatal area. Now the Jones jig has a buccal component which consists of this jig. Okay, this jig is actually going to go and be engaged into the headgear tube which is present on the molar band, and it is attached onto the premolar for the support. Okay, so it is ligated onto the premolar bracket. Now palatally, when you look, it resembles the other molar distalization appliance, that it consists of these large acrylic button which is going to be soldered onto the premolar band. Okay, so this is going to provide anchorage to the premolar to prevent its mesialization. And this Jones jig consists of this compressed coil spring which is going to be activated, and it's going to bring about a distalization force on the molars. So once you know what the different distalization appliances look like, okay, you can easily identify the answer here in this question because you can eliminate the other options. So there is no TMA springs which are present like similar to a pendulum appliance here. There is no jig that is present on the buccal surface, right? And it is not a removable plate like the aqua appliance. So this is a Fastback appliance.